I was in the middle of a business trip overseas when I got the email. It was from my parents, short and casual, like they were telling me about the weather. We sold your beach house to cover Olivia's debts. You didn't really need it anyway, right? I stared at the screen, my heart pounding. My fingers gripped my phone so tightly it might have cracked. My parents had done some questionable things before, but this? Selling my home without my consent to bail out my reckless younger sister? I didn't bother replying. Instead, I contacted the police. But what my parents didn't know was that they had made one critical mistake. The real estate agent called them while standing on the front porch of my beach house. And that's when their little scheme started falling apart. The phone buzzed in my hand. Dad. I took a deep breath and answered, "You went ahead and did whatever you wanted, didn't you?" My voice was ice. A heavy silence stretched between us. Then, his familiar sigh. "Madeline," he said, his voice carrying that same forced patience he always used when he thought I was overreacting. "I thought you'd understand. Olivia was in trouble. If we didn't pay off her debt, who knows what could have happened?" I let out a sharp, bitter laugh. "Oh, so you just decided to steal from me instead?" "It's not stealing," Dad said, his voice tight. "We're family. Family helps each other. Family." That damn word again. I had heard it all my life used as an excuse, a weapon, a leash. My name is Madeline Carter, and in my family, everything revolved around my younger sister, Olivia. She was 2 years younger than me, but you'd think she was royalty with the way my parents treated her. My first memory of favoritism was when I was 5. I had been dreaming of getting a bright red bicycle, and when I finally got it for my birthday, I thought I was the happiest kid alive. That lasted all of 3 days, because Olivia decided she wanted it. And just like that, my parents handed it over. "You're the big sister, Maddie. Let her have it." It never stopped. When I started school, the pencil case I loved, Olivia took it. When I wanted to take swimming lessons, no, Olivia had ballet and there wasn't enough money for both. Every time I won something, whether it was a race, an award, or even just a compliment, my parents would brush it off. But if Olivia so much as sneezed, the world had to stop. By the time I was in high school, I had already given up trying to compete for their love. I got into my dream university. My parents barely reacted. I built a successful business from the ground up. My parents didn't care. But Olivia? She dropped out of school, jumped between part-time jobs, and kept making one bad decision after another. And every time she screwed up, my parents rescued her, paid off her debts, covered for her mistakes, made excuses, and now they had taken it a step further. They had sold my beach house, my dream home, behind my back to bail her out. I tightened my grip on the phone. "Dad, tell me something," I said, my voice dangerously calm. "How did you even sell a house that isn't yours?" Another long pause. And then, the hesitation in his voice told me everything. I had the paperwork," he muttered. "It wasn't that hard to." I felt my stomach drop. "You forged my signature, didn't you?" Silence. I sucked in a sharp breath. My own parents had committed fraud against me. "Dad," I said slowly, my anger trembling just beneath the surface, "you do realize that's a crime, right?" "Madeline, don't be ridiculous. We're family." "No," I snapped. "This isn't a family matter. This is fraud, and I'm going to the police." The sharp intake of breath on the other end told me he hadn't expected that. "Wait, you wouldn't do that. Think about your mother. Think about Olivia. If you report this, our lives will be ruined." I almost laughed at the irony. Their lives would be ruined? What about me? What about all the years I had been ignored, dismissed, and used? What about the fact that they had just stolen from me again without a second thought? I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. I was done. So done. "You should have thought about that before you forged my name," I said. And then, for the first time in my life, I hung up on my father. The waves crashed against the shore below, the salty breeze whipping through my hair as I stood on the deck of my beach house. A place I had worked for, a place I had dreamed of, a place my parents had tried to steal, but this time I wasn't going to let them win. The moment I hung up, my phone started buzzing again. Dad, then Mom, then, to no one's surprise, Olivia. I didn't answer. Instead, I called the police. It took everything in me to stay calm as I explained what had happened. The forged documents, the fraudulent sale, the blatant theft. The officer on the other end asked a few questions, took down my information, and assured me they would investigate. I should have felt relief, but all I felt was exhaustion. I slumped down on the deck chair, staring out at the ocean. My ocean, the one place that had ever felt like mine. And my parents had tried to rip it away. A few hours later, my phone buzzed again, but this time it was a name that actually mattered: Ethan. The moment I answered, his steady voice filled my ear. "Maddie, are you okay?" Ethan, my boyfriend, my business partner, and the only person who had ever believed in me when no one else did. "I just got off the phone with the real estate agent," he continued. "The sale's been canceled." I let out a shaky breath, pressing my palm against my forehead. Thank God. He was just as shocked as we were. Apparently, when my friend who was the potential buyer asked about the sale, he had a weird feeling and called me first. A mix of relief and frustration boiled inside me. My parents had come this close to getting away with it, but they hadn't, because I wasn't the quiet, obedient daughter they had spent years trying to mold. I reported them, I admitted, my voice quieter now. There was a pause, then a soft exhale. "Good," Ethan said. "They crossed a line, Maddie. They crossed 100 lines," I muttered. I heard the sound of movement on his end. "I'm coming over. You're busy. You're more important." His words made my throat tighten, but I didn't argue. I just whispered, "Okay," because right now, I needed him. By the time Ethan arrived, the sun was setting. He found me where I had been all afternoon, sitting on the deck, staring at the waves. Without a word, he sat beside me and pulled me into his arms. And just like that, I broke. The tears I had been holding back spilled over, hot and angry. "I don't understand," I whispered. "How could they do this?" Ethan didn't try to give me some meaningless answer. He just held me, his fingers running through my hair. "Because they never saw it as yours," he finally said. "They've taken from you your whole life. They just assumed they could do it again." That was the worst part. They really thought I would let them. I sniffed, wiping my face. "I keep wondering if I should feel guilty. They're my parents. But all I feel is betrayed," he offered. I nodded. "And done." Ethan pulled back just enough to look at me. "Then be done." It was that simple, wasn't it? I had spent years trying to prove my worth to them, waiting for them to love me the way they loved Olivia. But they never would. And I was done chasing after something I would never get. The next morning, the police officially launched their investigation. I wasn't surprised when Mom called again, her name flashing across my screen like a warning. This time, I answered. "Madeline, how could you?" she demanded, her voice thick with anger. "You actually called the police on your own family?" I leaned against the kitchen counter, forcing myself to stay calm. "Yes," I said flatly, "because you committed fraud. We did it for Olivia," she snapped, as if that was supposed to justify everything. "And I'm supposed to just let it slide? You barely even use that house. Meanwhile, your sister," I laughed, a hollow, bitter sound. "There it is. The same excuse. Olivia needed it more than me, right? Just like she needed my bike when we were kids, my gifts, my opportunities." My mother went silent. I pressed on. "You've been enabling her for years. And where has it gotten you? She's $200,000 in debt, and instead of letting her deal with her own mess, you tried to steal from me. And for what? So she can do it again? She's your sister." "No," I said coldly. "She's your responsibility, not mine." "You're being so cruel," I scoffed. "You know what's cruel? Selling your daughter's house behind her back, forging her signature, lying about it." For the first time, I heard real desperation in her voice. "Madeline, please. If you don't drop this, your father and you and Dad did this to yourselves." I cut in. "And now you'll have to deal with the consequences." I hung up before she could say another word. That afternoon, Olivia texted me. "You ruined everything, Maddie. How could you do this to Mom and Dad?" I stared at the message for a long moment before typing back. "No, Olivia. They ruined everything by never holding you accountable. I'm done fixing your messes." Then I blocked her number. By the end of the week, the full weight of my parents' actions became clear. The police confirmed that my signature had been forged, and when confronted, My parents admitted everything. They had started planning this months ago, carefully forging documents, feeding lies to the real estate agent, convincing themselves that they weren't actually doing anything wrong because, in their minds, my things had never really belonged to me. And the worst part? They had even spread rumors in our old neighborhood. They told people that I was the one who had racked up debt, that Ethan and I were struggling financially, and that they were just helping us out by selling the house. My mother had stood in front of our old neighbors, shaming me for something she and Dad had done. I should have been shocked, but I wasn't. 2 weeks later, my parents were officially charged with attempted fraud. They wouldn't serve jail time, but the damage was done. My father was forced to resign from his job. My mother picked up 3 part-time shifts to make ends meet. And Olivia? She was already looking for her next get-rich-quick scheme. The cycle was continuing, but this time I wasn't part of it. One night, Ethan and I sat on the deck, watching the sun sink into the ocean. "This place deserves better memories," he said after a long silence. I turned to him. "What do you mean?" He smiled. "What if we turn this house into something good? A place for kids who never get these kinds of opportunities? Surf camps, charity events, something meaningful." A lump formed in my throat. A home that was built from love, not betrayal. I reached for his hand. "Let's do it." As the waves crashed below us, I realized something. I had lost my family, but I had gained my freedom, and for the first time in my life, that felt like a trade worth making. A week after my parents were charged, the calls stopped. The texts, the voicemails, the desperate attempts to manipulate me, it all just ceased. At first, the silence felt unnatural. Then, it felt like peace. Ethan and I kept moving forward. While my parents were busy dealing with the consequences of their actions, we focused on something that actually mattered, turning the beach house into something meaningful. But before we could do that, I needed one last conversation. I met Olivia at a cafe near her apartment. I wasn't sure if she would show, but there she was, sitting by the window, stirring her iced coffee like she had all the time in the world. She didn't even look up when I sat down. "So, what now?" she asked, her voice dripping with boredom. "You came to rub it in?" I ignored the bitterness in her tone. "I came because this is the last time we're going to talk." That got her attention. Her stirring stopped, her eyes narrowing. "What's that supposed to mean?" I leaned forward. "It means I'm done, Olivia, for good," she scoffed. "Oh, come on, Maddie. You're mad now, but you always come back. Not this time." She rolled her eyes. "Whatever. You're just being dramatic." I took a deep breath. "You don't get it, do you? You and Mom and Dad, you've all used me for so long. You just assumed I'd always be there. But I won't." Olivia leaned back in her chair, crossing her arms. "So what? You're just cutting us off?" That's so messed up. What's messed up is the fact that you never took responsibility for your life, I shot back. You've spent years making bad decisions and expecting someone else to clean them up. And guess what? I'm not your safety net? She scoffed again, but this time, there was something else behind it. Panic. Because she knew I was serious. I stood up. I really hope you figure things out, Olivia. But if you don't, it's not my problem anymore. For the first time, she looked genuinely afraid. Maddie, wait. But I was already walking away. I didn't need to hear her excuses. For the first time in my life, Olivia wasn't my responsibility. By the time I got back to the beach house, Ethan had already started working on renovations. You okay? He asked, setting down his toolbox. I nodded. Yeah, I just needed to say goodbye. He studied me for a moment, then pulled me into a hug. You did the right thing. I exhaled against his chest. Then why does it still hurt? Because you're a good person, he murmured. Even when they didn't deserve it. I closed my eyes and let the weight of it all settle. The betrayal, the loss, the freedom. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary. And now I was ready to move on. The next few months were a whirlwind. Ethan and I threw ourselves into our vision for the beach house. We partnered with local charities, set up events, and turned the space into something that actually mattered. At first, it felt strange remodeling a place that had once been nothing but a personal retreat. But the more we worked on it, the more it became ours again. One afternoon, as I was painting the deck railings, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Mom, we lost the house. Dad lost his job. Olivia is struggling. We need help. I stared at the message, feeling nothing, no guilt, no anger, just nothing. Ethan walked over, glancing at my phone. Let me guess, he said dryly. I let out a slow breath and deleted the message. Not my problem, and for the first time, I meant it. A year later, Ethan and I hosted our first big event at the beach house. It was a surfing program for kids who had never even seen the ocean before. Watching them run across the sand, their laughter carried by the waves, I felt something settle inside me. This was bigger than me, bigger than the pain my parents had caused. That night, as the sun set, Ethan and I sat on the deck, just like we had so many times before. He reached for my hand. You happy? I looked out at the ocean, feeling the weight of everything that had led me here. I finally am. And for the first time, I wasn't just saying it, I was living it. For the first time in my life, I didn't have to check my phone with a knot in my stomach. No desperate messages, no guilt-tripping voicemails, no more endless cycle of damage control. My parents had finally stopped reaching out, but that didn't mean they had stopped falling apart. A few weeks after our first event at the beach house, I ran into an old neighbor while grabbing coffee. Madeline! It's been so long, Miss S. Jenkins said, giving me a warm smile. But there was something else in her expression, pity. I already knew what was coming. Have you spoken to your parents? She asked hesitantly. I sipped my coffee. Not in a while. Her lips pressed together. Things have been hard for them. I didn't respond. I just waited. She sighed, lowering her voice. They lost their house, you know. Had to sell it to cover Olivia's debts. They live in a tiny apartment now, way out past the city. I let out a slow breath. I should have been shocked, but I wasn't. They're struggling, Maddie, she continued. Your mom works 3 jobs. Your dad took a night security shift. And Olivia, well, she's still Olivia. Of course she was. I heard she's trying to start some business now, she went on, rolling her eyes. One of those guaranteed successes scams. She keeps asking people for money. Your parents don't have any left, but she still demands they support her. I shook my head. Some things never changed, Miss S. Jenkins hesitated. I don't mean to pry, but have you thought about helping them? I met her gaze. No. She blinked, as if she hadn't expected that answer. I leaned forward. They made their choices, Miss S. Jenkins, over and over. And now, they're dealing with the consequences. Her face softened. I understand. I hate seeing families fall apart like this. So did I. But this wasn't my fault. It was theirs. That night, Ethan and I had dinner on the deck, the sound of the waves filling the silence between us. I told him about my conversation with Miss S. Jenkins. She asked if I was going to help them. Ethan set down his fork. And? I met his eyes. I told her no. A slow smile spread across his face. Proud of you. I let out a breath I didn't realize I was holding. It still felt surreal, choosing myself over them. But every time I did, it got a little easier. And every time I did, I felt lighter. A month passed. Then another. One evening, just as the sky turned orange with the sunset, I got a text. Olivia, I need money. Call me. I stared at the message, my pulse steady. A year ago, I would have felt obligated to respond. Now, I blocked her number. Let her figure it out. The last time I heard about my parents, it was through another former neighbor. Apparently, my father's health had declined. The stress of working nonstop had finally caught up to him, and he collapsed during a shift. My mother, still juggling multiple jobs, was exhausted, and Olivia, still making the same mistakes, still blaming everyone else. But none of it was my problem. For the first time, I had a life that was mine, and I wasn't going to waste another second looking back. It had been over 6 months since I last spoke to my parents. 6 months of peace. I didn't wake up to guilt-tripping voicemails. I didn't have to brace myself for the next crisis Olivia had caused. For the first time, my life wasn't about fixing someone else's mistakes. It was about me. One evening, Ethan and I were setting up for another event at the beach house when my phone buzzed. A number I didn't recognize. I hesitated for a moment before answering. Hello? A voice I hadn't heard in months filled my ear. Madeline, Mom. I sighed, pinching the bridge of my nose. What do you want? She exhaled sharply. You don't have to be so cold. I said nothing. She took that as permission to keep talking. Your father's in the hospital. I paused. I hadn't expected that. But before I could ask anything, she kept going. He collapsed at work. The doctors say it's exhaustion, stress, malnutrition. I felt Ethan's gaze on me, but I just stared at the floor. He's not doing well, Maddie, she continued. We're struggling. We need help. There it was. The real reason she had called. Not because she wanted to make things right. Not because she regretted anything, but because she needed something from me. Again, I leaned against the counter, gripping the edge. You want me to fix this for you? She scoffed. Don't be dramatic. We're family. I closed my eyes. That word again. Family. The leash they always used to drag me back. I exhaled slowly. No. A pause. What? I'm not helping you, Mom. Her breath hitched. Madeline, please. No, I repeated. Firmer this time. I gave you every chance in the world to do right by me. You made your choice, and now I'm making mine. Silence. Then her voice turned sharp. So, that's it? You're just going to let us suffer? I laughed bitterly. Oh, you mean the way you let me suffer for years? The way you watched Olivia destroy herself and kept making excuses? She said nothing. I pressed on. You stole from me. You betrayed me. And now that your lives are falling apart, you expect me to swoop in and fix it? Another silence. Then she snapped. You are so selfish, Madeline. I nearly laughed. Selfish. That was rich, coming from the woman who had sacrificed everything, including me, for Olivia. I shook my head. No, Mom. I just finally learned how to put myself first. You should try it sometime. Then, for the last time, I hung up on her. And this time, I knew I wasn't going back. The next day, I blocked her number. I blocked my father's. And even though Olivia hadn't tried reaching out again, I blocked her too. Whatever happened to them now wasn't my concern. They had spent their entire lives making choices, and now they had to live with them. A week later, Ethan and I sat on the beach, watching the waves roll in. He laced his fingers through mine. How do you feel? I thought about it for a moment. Lighter. Freer. Like I could finally breathe. I feel done, I admitted. And for the first time, that feels good. He smiled. Good. Because you deserve that. And for the first time in my life, I believed him. Months passed. Seasons changed. And for the first time in my life, I didn't look back. My parents stopped trying to contact me. Olivia disappeared into whatever scheme she had fallen for this time. And me? I lived. The beach house had become something more than I ever imagined. What once was just a symbol of my success, a quiet retreat away from my family's chaos, was now a place full of life. Ethan and I expanded our charity work, turning the house into a space for kids who had never experienced the ocean before. We held surf camps, community events, and even set up mentorship programs. It wasn't just about giving them a good time, it was about showing them something I had never been given as a child, a choice. A chance to believe in themselves, to know they mattered, to not feel invisible. Because I knew exactly what it felt like to be the person no one prioritized. And I refused to let these kids feel that way too. One afternoon, as I was cleaning up after an event, Ethan walked in, holding his phone. You're never gonna believe this, he said, shaking his head. I raised an eyebrow. What? He turned the screen toward me. It was an email from Olivia. I didn't even read it before sighing. Let me guess. She's out of money? Ethan nodded. She's begging for another investment. Claims this one is guaranteed. Of course she was. I took the phone, scrolling through the message. It was the same as always. Excuses. Blame. Manipulation. She even threw in a classic line. We're family. Don't you care? I stared at the words for a moment. Then, without hesitation, I deleted the email. Ethan smirked. That was fast. I shrugged. I meant it when I said I was done, and I had never meant anything more in my life. A year passed, a whole year without my parents, without Olivia, a year of peace. I didn't regret cutting them off. Not once, but sometimes I wondered if they had changed, if they had finally learned. Then, one night, I got my answer. Ethan and I were walking back from dinner when my phone buzzed. A private number. I hesitated, then answered. Hello? A familiar voice came through, slurred and bitter. Olivia. Wow, she muttered. You actually picked up. I immediately regretted it. What do you want, Olivia? She scoffed. Oh, I don't know, maybe to remind you that you ruined our family. I clenched my jaw. Of course. She hadn't changed. She hadn't learned. She was still the same person, blaming everyone but herself. I didn't ruin anything, I said evenly. I just stopped cleaning up your mess. She let out a cold laugh. Oh, please. You think you're better than us now? I sighed, already done with this conversation. I think I finally realized my worth. Silence. Then, she muttered, you think you won, don't you? I didn't respond right away. Because this wasn't about winning. It never had been. It was about choosing myself for the first time in my life. I took a deep breath, then said the last words I would ever say to Olivia. I didn't win. Olivia. I just stopped losing. Then, I hung up, blocked the number, and let her go for good. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of waves crashing against the shore. Ethan was already outside, sipping his coffee as he watched the sunrise. I joined him, wrapping my arms around myself as I took in the view. The ocean stretched out before us, endless and free. Like me. Ethan turned to me with a small smile. No regrets? I smiled back. Not one. He reached for my hand, squeezing gently. Then let's keep moving forward. And that's exactly what we did, because my past didn't define me. I did. And I was finally ready to live the life I deserved. Story 2, I cleaned my desk and my sister waved. Her unfounded charges had succeeded. Don't you think karma is a witch? She grinned. However, my sister had no clue that her sabotage would result in my greatest success when our biggest customer phoned me that night. As it seems, she wasn't the only one who had been hiding things. Alexandra, you're done here. Stephen Bennett, the managing partner of Bennett and Associates, couldn't even look me in the eye when he delivered the news. There is enough proof of client information leakage. His enormous mahogany desk was across from me. Through the glass walls of his corner office, my hands were holding the chair's armrests so firmly that my knuckles were white. I could see my sister, Victoria, observing the action from the water cooler, feigning to fill her cup. At the age of 32, I, Alexandra Parker, was on the verge of losing everything I had worked so hard to accumulate over the last 10 years. Victoria, at least, believed that. You know me, Stephen, I said, maintaining my composure in spite of the anger that was growing within of me. I have 8 years of experience with this business. Half of our key accounts were brought in by me. Why would I expose myself to such danger by disclosing customer information? He rearranged the documents on his desk. Papers I knew Victoria had painstakingly constructed to frame me. Alexandra, the evidence is quite apparent. Competing businesses received client information from your email account. The digital trail, the timestamps, everything is here. It was, of course. Victoria had always been tech-savvy, and it seems she had been utilizing that ability to plot my demise. I caught a tiny grin teasing the edges of her mouth as I looked at her once again. My younger sister, who is 29 years old, had obviously grown weary of being the shadow of me at the company. At least, let me see the proof. Even though I knew the answer, I still asked. I apologize, but we must act swiftly and covertly because of the delicate nature of the matter. You will be escorted by security to clear your desk. I noticed a glimmer of hesitation when he finally looked me in the eyes. Just so you know, Alexandra, I never thought you would do this. I didn't either, Stephen. I didn't either. Victoria slid into place next to me as I left his office, her high-end shoes clicking in perfect time with the marble floor. She shouted, "Goodbye, sis," loud enough for everyone in the workplace to hear. Don't you think karma is a witch? I looked at her, admiring her beautiful outfit, her well-groomed blonde hair, and the triumphant sparkle in her eyes. Our mother used to say that you were the smart one, Victoria. I grinned as I saw her expression change to one of bewilderment. I suppose she was correct? Suspicion replaced the perplexity. I was more composed than she had anticipated. Excellent. Let her be concerned. By my desk, security was waiting. A cardboard box now stands in place of my old desk. I was limited to whatever personal stuff I could fit in a single box after 8 years of effort, establishing relationships and proving myself. I could sense my coworkers' looks as I packed my belongings. could already hear the beginning of the whispering. "Alexandra Parker, did you hear her? Is it not unbelievable?" The silent ones, always. Victoria lingered close by, clearly relishing every second of my embarrassment. This was expertly prepared by her. That's what I had to give her. The phony email trail, the client data that was exposed, and the meticulous timestamp modification that gave the impression that I had been selling secrets to rivals for months. It was precisely the type of intricate plan in which she had always excelled. She was unaware that I had anticipated it. I had observed little adjustments in the way clients were being treated 3 months prior. Proposals were changed after I submitted them, and meetings were rescheduled without informing me. Minor inconsistencies in correspondence with clients. I knew better than most people who would have written things off as typical office misunderstandings. After all, I had grown up with Victoria. When we were children, I discovered long ago that my sister's smile typically portended danger. She would grin like that and then accuse me of causing whatever trouble she did. She would grin before informing our parents about the events I had attended as teens, neatly omitting her own presence. And now, when I put my family photo in the box, she grinned while methodically ruining my career at Bennett and Associates. Father, mother. At the Christmas party last year, I was Victorian. False harmony and smiles. I reflected on our largest client, Marcus Chen, who had called me the previous week. "Alexandra," he replied in a worried tone, "there's something odd going on with our account. Following our conversations, documents are being changed. The numbers don't add up." "Marcus," I'd said, "I know. For a few more days, I need your trust. Are you able to accomplish that?" He made his decision as I had anticipated. Over the years, we developed a strong connection based on outcomes and trust. The fact that clients would expressly ask to deal with me rather than Victoria was something Victoria had always internalized. I put my coffee mug, a present from my first customer, into the box, painted the words "Trust the process," and considered the USB drive concealed at the bottom. It wasn't only Victoria who was adept at using technology. "Do you need assistance doing that?" Victoria inquired, her tone brimming with illusory worry. "The least I can do for my older sister is this." I stood up straight and looked her in the eye. "I believe you've done enough, Vic, so no thanks." Her smile wavered a bit. Once more, she had anticipated sobs, entreaties, rage, or anything other than this serene acceptance. It had never made sense to Victoria. The real strength is in the response rather than the assault. I heard snippets of Victoria's talk with Stephen as security led me to the elevator. What a shame! I never suspected. We were fortunate to catch it. As the elevator doors closed, her voice trailed off, and I couldn't help but smile. Mike, the security guy who had known me for years, was uneasy. "I must say, Miss Parker, I'm not comfortable with this. Regards, Mike. Things aren't always what they appear." The smell of budding cherry blossoms from a park across the street filled the lobby, which was thankfully deserted as I left Bennett and Associates for what Victoria believed would be the final time the spring air would be brisk. This time of year in a city has always been my favorite. It seemed like a period of rebirth. A new beginning. How appropriate. I got into a cab, handed her my address, and took out my phone. Our mother missed 3 calls. In our household, news spread quickly. Dad texted me. "They are exactly on time, so give me a call when you can." Marcus Chen sent a message. "I recently learned about the news. Still have faith in you? 7 o'clock for dinner." Leaning back in the seat, I watched the city scroll by after sending a brief confirmation via text. Victoria had never given any thought to the possibility that someone else was playing a lengthier game because she was usually so engrossed in her own. When I first came, my apartment was a sleek, contemporary room on the 20th floor with views of the city skyline, a haven of peace. After placing the box on my kitchen counter, I at last gave myself permission to absorb the full impact of what had transpired. I've worked with my sister for years, seen her silent bitterness develop, and knew that the day will come. While I was preparing coffee, our mother called once again. I left it on voicemail since I wasn't prepared for her specific type of dysfunctional family. She had always given preference to Victoria, using excuses like she's just spirited or she's finding her way to justify her actions. I could still picture her reaction. Are you certain he didn't provoke her in any way? The wonderful scent of freshly made espresso filled my flat as the coffee maker buzzed. I took off my coffee mug's fake bottom to reveal the USB drive concealed within. Despite her technological prowess, Victoria had overlooked one important element. The company's IT staff was excellent at tracking down illicit access to the system, and I was the one who hired them. Once more, my phone buzzed. This time, it was a text from Victoria. "I hope this isn't too much for you, sis. After all, business is business." I could see her seated at my former workstation, most likely already making the necessary arrangements, assuming she had prevailed. Although Victoria had always been skilled at games, she had never been taught the most crucial rule. Wait until you are certain that the game is done before celebrating. I considered the evidence on the USB drive while I got ready for supper with Marcus. Every edited document, every fake timestamp, and every illegal access to my email account could be linked to Victoria's computer. More significantly, though, it included evidence of another thing. She had been doing something behind everyone's back. I painted the city in pink and gold as I got ready for supper while the sun was sinking. The Bennett and Associates building was visible from my window, its windows glimmering in the twilight. Victoria would soon be on her way, most likely to celebrate her triumph. My phone gave me one last buzz. Marcus sent me another message, saying to bring someone along. I smiled and put the USB disk in my handbag, hoping it was all right. "Of course," I said. The greater the better. Victoria had always said that I was too innocent and trusting. She had never realized that the most effective tool in business was trust. When used properly, she had neglected the connections I had made outside of Bennett and Associates while she was working, ruining my image there. I was on my way to meet Marcus. Something our grandma used to say crossed my mind. Climbing over others to get to the top isn't the definition of success. The goal is to construct something so lofty that no one can top it. What I had created at Bennett and Associates had been destroyed by Victoria, but she had unwittingly given me the chance to create something much, far greater. And that something was built on the idea that I would be having supper in precisely 1 hour. The match was far from done. It was only getting started. When I got to La Maison, Marcus Chan was already sitting at our regular table, but it was his friend that caused me to stop. Eleanor Wright, the CEO of Wright Global Investments, one of the biggest investment businesses in the nation, was seated next to him. Alexandra Marcus, who had not displayed any of the worry from his previous communications, got up to welcome me. Eleanor is someone I think you know. I noted her firm hold and approving stare as I shook her hand, just by reputation. "Miss S. Wright, it's a pleasure to meet you. Please, Eleanor." She motioned me to take a seat. "Marcus has told me a lot about you, especially about what happened today. As I've discovered when researching Wright Global, a server showed up with wine and poured 3 glasses of what I knew to be Eleanor's particular vintage. This supper was no accident, but I believe Victoria feels rather proud of herself. Although she could discover that client loyalty isn't as readily transferred as she believes," Marcus replied in a tone that was deliberately neutral. Before answering, I took a drink of wine and let the deep flavor to linger on my tongue. Victoria's priority has always been on quick wins. She seldom ever thinks long-term. Leaning forward, Eleanor's silver hair caught the restaurant's soothing lights. "While your sister was planning your departure, Alexandra, that's precisely what caught my attention. Were you not collecting evidence?" I put the USB drive on the table after taking it out of my bag. Not only because she sabotaged it, I found out 3 months ago that Victoria had been doing more than simply disclosing customer information. James Porter, a hedge fund manager, has been purchasing insider trading information from her. Marcus raised his eyebrows. "Porter, his recent trades have been exceptionally profitable, really successful." Eleanor concurred. "Even though my team has been keeping an eye on him, we haven't been able to identify his source yet." When I took out my phone, a number of screenshots appeared. Victoria believed she was smart for communicating with Porter using encrypted messaging applications, but she overlooked the backup mechanism I put in place for the company 2 years ago. All communications and data transfers are recorded and saved. Eleanor's eyes glistened with curiosity. "And you've been gathering this proof as you let her scheme come to pass. Losing a battle is sometimes necessary to win the war." I handed my phone to her. Victoria didn't realize I was following her real leaks since she was too busy accusing me of disclosing client information. Marcus gave a quiet laugh. I have to say, Alexandra, I wasn't convinced when you urged me to cooperate with her plan. However, I now get it. Someone else will benefit from Bennett and his companion's failure. Eleanor made it plain what she meant. Correct. Global has been considering growing its legal department. We want someone who is knowledgeable in both strategy and the law. Someone with the ability to plan 3 steps ahead. I had time to take in the situation before the waiter came back to collect our orders. Yes, Eleanor wasn't only extending a job offer to me. She was giving me the chance to create something of my own. Once we were alone again, Eleanor said, the job would come with full autonomy. You select your own clients and assemble your own staff. Naturally, the proof you have gathered about porters and insider trading would also be of great interest to us. Bennett and Associates, what about them? Even though I knew the answer, I still asked. Marcus put his glass of wine down. Stephen and a few other clients who trust my judgment have already been told that I will be moving my business elsewhere. Eleanor smiled slightly and added that Victoria's victory might not last as long as she had hoped. I considered my sister, who was presumably still rejoicing over what she believed to be her final victory. Our parents had always commended Victoria for her drive, her cunning, and her willingness to go above and beyond to achieve her goals. They had considered my meticulous approach to be a weakness and my time-consuming relationship building to be a waste. What time do you want me to begin? Eleanor was asked. Why not right now? She placed a folder on the table after taking it out. Your agreement, if you decide to accept it. Page 3 contains the compensation package. My eyes startled at the number as I opened the folder. I made 3 times as much as I do at Bennett and Associates. Eleanor's tone became more solemn as she said, There's one more thing. The evidence you have gathered would be of great interest to the SEC. Porter and your sister may suffer severe repercussions. As I shut the folder, I reflect on all the instances in which Victoria tried to discredit me, undermine me, and make me doubt myself. It's possible that the elderly Alexandra paused and felt bad about handing her off. However, when Victoria made the decision to ruin my career, the rules were altered. She would now have to deal with the repercussions of her decision. I strongly said that my team will provide the material to the SEC tomorrow morning. Eleanor raised her glass to long games and fresh starts with a smile. Just as my phone rang with another text from Victoria, Marcus said, We clinked glasses. Are you already missing your office? I'll handle things well, so don't worry. Without answering, I put my phone aside. Give her time to enjoy herself. There would be shocks of its own tomorrow. The remainder of the meal was consumed with strategies, conversations, and plans for the future. Eleanor's idea for Wright Global's legal department was exactly what I had always wanted. A staff committed to ethical behavior and long-term partnerships, not simply billable hours and fast victories. We had just finished our coffee. Marcus cleared his throat. Alexandra, there's one more thing you should be aware of. In an attempt to persuade some of your former clients to continue working for her at Bennett and Associates, your sister has already contacted them. She has, of course. It didn't surprise me. Victoria has consistently attempted to enter areas that I cleared out. She will be shocked to learn that such relationships are more difficult to transfer than she initially believes. Whether it was my role on the high school debate team or my first apartment after college, according to Eleanor, trust is earned rather than inherited. My automobile was waiting outside the restaurant. The door was kept open by another benefit of my new job at Wright Global as Eleanor's driver. She gave me one final look. I have 40 years of experience in this field, Alexandra. I have witnessed every form of corporate treachery and sabotage, but you've handled it with more poise and forethought than I've seen many others. Thank you, Eleanor. She smiled knowingly and added, Don't thank me yet. You may have to deal with more family turmoil than you anticipated when the SEC visits Bennett and Associates tomorrow. Of course, she was correct. Our mom would be heartbroken. Our dad let us down. The family name would be tainted by Victoria's activities. Families, like businesses, occasionally had to confront harsh realities in order to grow stronger. I was thinking about the workplace I had just emptied out, while my automobile navigated the downtown streets. Victoria was presumably sitting there right now, feeling safe in her win, oblivious that her world was about to fall around her. My phone gave me one last buzz, our mother's message. Victoria told us what occurred. How could you undermine the firm's confidence like this? We raised you better. Without answering, I switched off my phone. There would be plenty drama tomorrow. We were going to celebrate tonight. Despite her attempts to bring me down, Victoria unintentionally helped me move towards something far greater than Bennett and his friends could ever provide. Getting even isn't always the greatest form of retaliation. It's about overcoming. I got at Wright Global's shiny offices the following morning, exactly as the sun was peeking over the city. With views that made my previous office appear like a storage closet, Eleanor had made arrangements for me to have a corner office on the 45th floor, which was higher than I had ever been at Bennett and Associates. Since sunrise, my phone had been buzzing constantly. In the legal industry, rumors spread quickly, and the SEC's visit to Bennett and Associates was already the talk of town. I chose to ignore the calls and texts in favor of organizing my new workstation. Then I couldn't ignore Stephen Bennett himself when my phone rang. Alexandra. His voice lacked the assurance it usually possessed, and it was strained. We must speak. Stephen, about what? Regarding how easily you fell for Victoria's falsehoods, or how she has been giving James Porter insider trade information. A lengthy pause ensued. The SEC is present. They have a lot of proof. Indeed, they do. I made sure my degrees were precisely straight before placing them on the wall of my new workplace. While Victoria was busy framing me, I gathered evidence. Why did you bring this to me? It nearly made me chuckle. Did you think I was real? Yesterday, you didn't even give me an opportunity to explain myself. Please, Alexandra. The company may be destroyed by this. Stephen, that's no longer my concern. As if on cue, Eleanor showed up at my doorway with 2 cups of coffee, indicating that I had a new firm to worry about. Without saying another word, I hung up. I assume that this morning is going well for Bennett and Associates. She gave one of the coffees to me. You could say that, I sipped, enjoying the quality of the roast. Far superior to the coffee in the break room at my previous company, Victoria has been taken into custody. Eleanor took a seat in one of my visiting seats and nodded. Insider trading is not tolerated by the SEC. The Bar Association does not either. She will most likely be disbarred. Among other repercussions, Eleanor gave me a close examination and began to reconsider. As I organized my desk, I reflected about Victoria's arrogant expression and the years of her subtly manipulating and sabotaging me. Once more, my phone buzzed. This time, our father. I let the voicemail go. Families may be complex. Eleanor noted that allowing others to suffer the repercussions of their choices is sometimes the most compassionate thing we can do. We were cut off by a knock on my door. Standing there with a big basket full of my favorite pastries from the French bakery close to my former workplace was Marcus Chin. A present for the house? He smiled. Or, I guess, office warming. Eleanor stood and remarked, perfect timing. Alexandra. In an hour, we will meet to talk about the organization of your new division. After she leaves, I'll let you two catch up. Marcus put the basket down and sat down where she had left off. Bennett and Associates is where I recently left. It's anarchy over there. How awful. Handcuffed, Victoria was escorted out. Half of the workforce is updating their resume while Stevens tries to soothe the other partners. He reclined. There's also your mom, stating that this is all a misunderstanding to anybody who would listen. She was, of course. Our mother had been ignoring the harm created by Victoria's actions for years. She'll have a hard time explaining away the proof. Taking a crescent out of the basket, I replied. Marcus dropped his voice and spoke about proof. There are rumors that Porter has already consented to testify against Victoria in order to receive leniency. It seems that he possesses recordings of their talks. I grinned. Victoria had never thought that others may be manipulating her since she was so sure of her ability to control them. Another text message from our mother appeared on my phone. Your sister is inconsolable. How could you harm your own family in this way? Marcus shook his head as I showed him the note. It's funny that devotion to family only appears to operate in one direction. It always has. I placed my phone on the desk, face down. I can't do anything right. And Victoria can't do anything wrong. Everyone is aware of the truth now, at least. Meetings and introductions dominated the remainder of the morning. They all appeared excited to work under my direction, and Eleanor had put together a talented team. With greater funding and total control, it was everything I had envisioned creating at Bennett and Associates. My assistant, I now had an assistant, told me that Victoria's arrest was making news at lunchtime. According to local news websites, a former partner of Bennett and Associates was detained for engaging in insider trading. There were pictures of Victoria being escorted out of the building beneath the headlines. At last, her flawless poise broke. My father eventually left a voicemail when I was looking over possible office locations for my growing division. Alexandra, what you did? Victoria's career is being destroyed, even though I am aware of her errors. Your mom is inconsolable. We brought you up to defend, not to betray, your family. Give me a call back. This has to be fixed. Make this right. Their solution had always been that. Make excuses for Victoria's behavior. Provide justifications. Encourage me to forget and forgive. Not this time, though. In the late afternoon, while I was wrapping up talks with possible team members, Eleanor made another visit. I was told by your sister that she was requesting a bargain. She is requesting a reduced sentence in return for information concerning further unlawful conduct at Bennett and Associates. She is, of course. It didn't surprise me. Victoria was usually the first to blame others in order to protect herself. Did she specifically blame anyone? Stephen Bennett. Eleanor had a glint in her eyes. It seems that he was aware of some of her actions, but he decided to ignore them. The parts came together with a click. He had believed Victoria's charges against me so quickly because of this. Already, he was compromised. I understood that the firm would not survive this. No, Eleanor concurred. However, that gives us chances. A few of their most senior colleagues have already inquired about openings here. I reflected on the company my father had founded and the legacy he had taken such pride in, now disintegrating as a result of his own deliberate blindness and Victoria's deeds. Eleanor spoke gently, sometimes. In order to build something greater in their place, we must allow things to fall apart. After a month, I watched the city sunset while standing at my new office at Wright Global. The Bennett and Associates building, where moving trucks had been stationed for the whole week, was visible from this location. With its reputation in ruins, the business was disintegrating and scattering its last clients. Victoria had accepted a plea agreement that included disbarment and a hefty fee in exchange for avoiding jail time. She returned to live with our parents, giving up her expensive apartment and fashionable clothes to cover her legal bills. She was employed as a legal assistant at a small business outside of the city. When I last heard from her, with her now tarnished name, it was the only job she could obtain. It buzzed on my phone. My dad texted me. Is it possible for us to meet? Only us? I hesitated for a second before responding. The time is 7 p.m. When I got there, he was already there and appeared older than I had recalled. It had been a difficult month. I sat down and he remarked, "You look good, correct? You must be getting good treatment from Global." "Yes, it is." I looked closely at him. "How is Victoria doing?" With a groan, he combed through his thinning hair. "Having trouble. Your mom is also having a difficult time. How about you?" "I've been thinking a lot," he said. "About the things we tolerated with Victoria, about how we brought you both up. Alexandra, we also let you down. We overlooked Victoria's actions, gave you the impression that you were the one in charge. The comprehension one. How much that harmed you was never shown to us." I took a sip of water to process what he had said. He had never been this close to apologizing. Victoria made her own decisions. Finally, I said, "However, you and your mother did let them. She inquires about you. You are aware, claims that she now knows why you did what you did. My sister, who had spent years attempting to undermine me and ultimately destroying herself, came to mind. Dad, I didn't do it to get even. It was correct. So I did it." Slowly, he nodded. "That's what makes it more difficult, I know. The moral one was always you, the one we ought to have heard." When our dinner arrived, we each had a chance to gather our thoughts. Eleanor Wright offered to purchase the remaining business from the restaurant-type corporate clients. I now represent it at Wright Global. She wants to take our remaining assets and put them into your division, he remarked abruptly. I was aware of this. I had personally recommended it to Eleanor. How will you respond? In any case, I believe it's time to retire. He forced a little smile. You might be able to recruit some of our former employees. Give them a new beginning. Sarah from accounting is already doing it. She will begin next week. For a time, we ate in cozy solitude, the burden of unsaid words that still hangs above us. At last, he spoke once more. Alexandra, you have my admiration. I ought to have mentioned that more frequently. Thank you, Dad. He took an envelope out of his jacket as we were wrapping up supper. This is what your mother wanted me to offer you. Last week, Victoria wrote it. I accepted the mail without opening it. It took longer for certain wounds to heal. I eventually read Victoria's letter back at my office. It was short yet heartfelt. I'm sorry for everything, Alexandra. I never gave you enough credit for your strength. More intelligent as well. I hope you will forgive me eventually, but if not, I can understand. Victoria. After putting the letter in my desk drawer, I turned to gaze at the city lights outside. Eleanor's message chimed on my phone. Tomorrow for dinner. We ought to rejoice at the Bennett purchase. I said I looked forward to it. I occasionally come to the realization that the finest endings don't include triumph or retribution. They are about development, about overcoming the efforts of others to prevent you from becoming the person you were destined to be. Victoria had attempted to ruin my career, but she had freed me in the process, free to create something more powerful, better, and genuinely my. And that was the most significant triumph of all. Story 3, I was met at the airport by my sister's family and my parents, who traveled to Mexico. My passport was frozen. I looked about in panic. My mom grinned. No passport? Oh no. You're not going home, I suppose? My sister laughed. My dad sneered. Well, anything. Only genuine family ice is returning. They went through the gate after laughing. However, a nightmare was waiting for them when they arrived home. In Phoenix, on a sweltering Sunday afternoon, Maggie was at the front entrance of her parents' house. She wiped the perspiration from her forehead as the dry breeze of the desert rustled her shoulder-length brown hair. She picked up the bottle of wine she had brought to their usual family dinner on the weekends. In the affluent Paradise Valley area, her parents' home remained a dignified presence amidst the well-kept palms. She sighed deeply and pressed the doorbell. Susan, her mother, opened the door looking like she was posing for a social media snapshot in her gorgeous outfit and flawless makeup. The desert-style garden was visible behind her through enormous windows. You're running late. Everybody has been waiting. Amy has already arrived with her family. As Maggie took off her shoes and entered the living room, she grinned pityingly at what her mother had said. Her feet felt comfortable on the pricey Persian carpet. Photographs of the Walker family adorned the walls of the living room. The wedding of her parents, the graduations of Maggie and her sister Amy, Amy's wedding, and a timeline showing the development of Amy's daughter Sarah from infancy to the present. It appears that the smiles in these pictures depict the ideal family. Every picture was painstakingly arranged, perhaps for Instagram. Holding her daughter Sarah, age 8, Amy waved from the white leather sofa. Her husband Greg, dressed in his typical expensive brand name polo shirt, sat next to them. His immaculately combed hair seemed strangely inappropriate for a vacation. Maggie? Hello? David, her father, glanced up from his newspaper and gave a little nod. He continued to act like a teacher even after he retired, watching his daughter through his reading glasses. Amy began attending a brand new yoga center. As she monopolized the talk regarding local issues, her mother started bragging while pouring iced tea into a pricey glass. In the past, the teacher trained Hollywood superstars. Although the monthly cost is somewhat excessive, Amy finds it ideal. Her father folded his newspaper carefully and said, "Yes, our little girl has a lot of ambition. She never skips church services and is committed to her family and community." Maggie drank her drink in silence. The deep crimson liquid flowed around her warped reflections. Her accomplishment with a significant new client and her promotion at the accounting business last week were not mentioned. In this house, her accomplishments were as imperceptible as air. "Hello." Amy was softly brushing Sarah's hair when she abruptly shifted the topic. She smiled calculatingly. "Do you recall our conversation regarding the vacation to Mexico?" Maggie stopped. Last month, they made jokes about the trip. They never seemed serious to her. The words rose to her throat, and she swallowed them gently. You said you would cover us all. Cancun is the destination for the entire family, Amy exclaimed, as though it were inevitable. There was a tone of confident triumph in her voice. The ideal resort would be all-inclusive. Her mother spoke out right away, reclining comfortably on the pricey couch and wearing a blissful look. Remember your golf clubs, David. I've heard that their classes are excellent. Hold on a second. Maggie's brow began to perspire coldly as she attempted to interrupt. You do realize that this is a promise? A faint undertone of intimidation was in Amy's voice. Sarah is excited about it. Are you not, Sarah? Maggie's heart was pulled by her naive niece's grin. Maggie sighed softly as she gazed inwardly into her glass of crimson wine. The pressure and expectations from the family, as well as the naive grin of her 8-year-old niece. After waiting a long time, she nodded slowly. Her money would undoubtedly be severely impacted by the costly vacation. Okay? The morning in Phoenix started early than usual. The Walker family assembled at the well-known restaurant's patio around 7 a.m. glory of the morning. Susan suggested avoiding the heat by going to the less packed patio. As though it had been set up for a picture shoot, the table arrangement was ideal. As the morning light shone through the terrace windows, the fragrance of the chef's delectable eggs Benedict filled the air around their table. Remember to bring your passport, sis? Amy's tone of concern was overly dramatic. Once I nearly forgot mine. Well, it's all right, Maggie said wearily. The previous night, she had checked her bags 3 times since she was too excited to sleep. Her pricey leather shoulder purse contained her passport securely. Oh, such a beautiful new purse. Maggie's mother's eyes were fixed on her luggage. I have to go to the bathroom. Maggie got to her feet. Her bladder was being pressed by her morning coffee. This is where you may leave your bag. Nobody is going to accept it. She was followed by her mother's voice. Maggie placed her purse on the table and went inside without giving it any thought. What followed was coolly captured by the surveillance cameras. After taking a quick look around and sipping her coffee, her mother reached inside Maggie's bag, quickly took out the passport, and tucked it into her own purse. In less than 10 seconds, Amy, her daughter, gave the situation a little smile. Pretending not to notice, Father David continued to stare at the newspaper. Sarah, who was just 8 years old, cocked her head, perplexed by what her grandma had done. Maybe I ought to have gone for the buttermilk pancakes. As if nothing had occurred in the car on the way to the airport, Maggie's mother was idly looking over the menu when she got back. Maggie was uncomfortable. The family chat sounded very shallow. She couldn't quite understand why she felt uneasy, but Amy and her mother were being particularly cordial. Sky Harbor International Airport in Phoenix. At the check-in counter, the family formed a queue. Please, passport. Maggie started looking through her bag at the agent's suggestion. Her once calm motions became more and more frenetic. Wallet, smartphone, makeup bag. However, the passport that was supposed to be there was missing. Take a minute. Maggie started to tremble. The blue passport cover was nowhere to be seen, so she dug into the bottom of her luggage. What's the matter? There was a trace of laughter in her mother's voice. My passport. I am unable to locate it. Maggie's face lost its color. You don't have it, I see. Her mother put her palm over her lips. You're not able to come then, are you? She chuckled. Amy laughed. How irresponsible of you, sis. Her dad simply snorted. That's all, then. Her mother faced the counter agent once more. We're going to proceed. Hold on. The airport lobby reverberated with Maggie's voice. We will only be traveling with the actual family. The words of her mother were like a sharp knife. The family is making their way back toward the exit gate. Amy and her mother's happy giggles. The uninterested back of her father. Only Sarah glanced back at Maggie with apprehension. It was a scene Maggie will never forget. In the midst of the airport chaos, she stood still like ice. The morning's events at the restaurant played like a film in her head. Amy's strange smile, her father's face obscured by the newspaper, and her mother's actions. Everything had been prearranged. Maggie's eyes were regaining their serenity, but her hands were shaking with fear, despair, or rage. The sanity of her accountant was gradually returning. The security cameras had documented the truth, and her smartphone had filmed every discussion of the morning. "Let's stop this," Maggie said softly. Her determination was lit by the light coming through the enormous windows of the airport. Maggie's first destination after exiting the airport was Morning Glory, where they enjoyed breakfast. She parked her car amid the high-end cars and looked in the rearview mirror to see how she looked. Her swollen eyelids revealed that she had a restless night. 11 a.m. There weren't many patrons inside the restaurant, which was in the transitional period between breakfast and lunch service. "Does the management have time?" Maggie's tone was unexpectedly serene. As an accountant used to bargaining with big businesses, her professional attitude was working flawlessly. "You asked for me?" Janet Morrison, a female manager, emerged with a welcoming grin that belied the perceptive eyes she had cultivated during years of working in the service sector. "Regarding a theft that happened here at approximately 7 in the morning, I would want to watch the security camera tape. Today," Maggie clarified the circumstances, highlighting the gravity of passport theft and implying that the police were involved. Janet's face shifted without warning. "The security video. My passport was stolen by my mother." Maggie's voice wavered a bit. "And today, without me, my family is traveling to Cancun." Janet's gaze expanded. Hearing the Walker family's name made her even more shocked. Notable people in Paradise Valley. In the security camera monitoring room, "Kindly wait a moment." On the blue-tinted screen, the events of the morning were vividly visible. "Would you please preserve this video for me?" Maggie gently asked to take a picture of the screen using her phone and to make thorough notes of the times and situations. "Sister." Janet gave a quiet nod. The local police station was the next stop. When a victim report was filed, evidence was preserved, and files were made. Maggie was moving forward as planned. "I also have recordings on audio." Maggie pulled out her phone. The discussions at breakfast and the activities at the airport. Everything was recorded. The security camera video from the restaurant has been secured. It demonstrates the theft of the passport. Maggie painstakingly laid forth the evidence. "What time will your family be back?" 1 week from now." Officer Thompson took notes with great care. Theft of a passport is a severe offense, particularly when it includes travel abroad. "I get it," Maggie spoke firmly. "However, my thoughts turned to Sarah, my niece." Officer Thompson's gaze grew gentler. "Let's maintain the possibility of resolution." They made plans for the next week, police patrol schedules and neighborhood factors. Even a possible reaction from the media. How you spend the time before your family gets back is what matters most. After giving Officer Thompson's remarks a serious nod, Maggie walked out of the police station. Maggie went to the Ritz-Carlton in Phoenix. Her parents would undoubtedly phone her nonstop if she went back home. She sought space away from the top-floor balcony of the room. She gazed down at the skyline of Phoenix. The desert landscape was being painted crimson by the sunset. Maggie checked her emails on her laptop. My dear daughter had already received an apologetic letter from her mother. "I just wanted you to think for a moment." Placing family last at all times. The room reverberated with the sound of the delete button. 20 of her sister's unread texts were visible on her smartphone. She didn't read and erase them all. "Let's get this over with." Maggie drank whiskey and worked out her strategy. Legal preparations, monetary agreements, examining potential new employment prospects, all for the next week. The red sunset disappeared under the sky. There was no longer any uncertainty, even if the upcoming week would undoubtedly be lengthy. She could see the lights of planes landing at the airport in the distance, and for the first time in her life, she was going to be completely free. Maggie gave a soft smile. The night sky of Phoenix was illuminated by a full moon. The moonlight was particularly bright against the clearly pure air of the desert. 11 p.m. The quiet in the posh Paradise Valley community was strange. Her parents' house was in front of 2 police cruisers that were waiting with their lights off. Several of the surrounding homes had lights on, and shadows from inquisitive neighbors could be seen moving around windows. In order to avoid missing what was going to happen in the Walker's garden, the local gossips were obviously holding their breath. In the moonlight, carefully tended desert plants create strange shadows. Playing in this garden as a youngster seemed like a thing of the past to Maggie. Officer Thompson was using the radio to make last-minute verification. The weight of having seen innumerable family disintegrations was evident in the veteran officer's voice. Maggie sighed deeply in the rear seat of the police cruiser. The preceding week's events were like a movie playing in her head. The unending barrage of messages from her family, lonely evenings in the opulent hotel, and aerial views of the city lights. It was all an act. False apologies and open excuses. Maggie's face contorted for a brief instant. She calmed herself after catching a glimpse of herself in the rearview mirror. Officer Thompson's voice filled the vehicle. Miss Walker. As intended, the cab has left the municipal boundaries. Through the main gate, they will enter. Maggie gave a quiet nod. Her calm judgment had returned after spending a week at the opulent hotel. She checked her cosmetics and changed the hue of her navy blue outfit. Her armor was impeccable grooming. She had the backing of her accountant's pride. Right now, are you prepared? Throughout her 30-year tenure, Officer Thompson's voice had a maternal tenderness to it. She must have witnessed a lot of these family conflicts. Indeed, naturally, it was surprising how steady Maggie's voice was. Tonight, years of perseverance would come to an end. Taxi headlights came on in the distance. A line of light and shadow was formed by the street trees in the area. 11:15 p.m. was displayed on the clock. I will initiate communication. Officer Thompson used the radio to give orders. This might turn into a civil case. Minimal action. Be particularly mindful of the psychological impact on children. In front of the home, the cab came to a gentle halt. The quiet was broken by the sound of tires on gravel. Amy came out of the back seat first. Her sundress, brand name, and tanned skin all suggested a sophisticated getaway. She had her hair done in the newest style. Her flawless nails are a front for elegance. Next, Mom Susan. While wearing her normal stately countenance, a hint of weariness behind her flawless makeup revealed that she was carrying a costly travel bag on her shoulder. But her gaze frantically looked around her. Father David started quietly taking the bags out of the trunk. His hands trembled visibly, but his old teacher's attention to detail was evident in the way he organized the bags. At last, 8-year-old Sarah's naive smile and Disneyland t-shirt didn't seem appropriate in this setting. The future of the family was in her tiny hands, which were holding a teddy animal. Officer Thompson's voice pierced the still night. Mr. and Miss S. Walker. In the moonlight, the officer in uniform came out. Her mother's face became cold. You could see the blood draining from behind her flawless makeup. Is there a problem? There was a hint of tension in her father's voice. A previous teacher's dignity was gone. Now, let's talk about an instance of passport theft. Her mother's face lost its color. Her pricey purse almost fell out of her shaking hands. Maggie got out of the squad car. She had a noble and lovely form in the moonlight. She had made the decision to be her best self at this time of freedom after years of oppression. Let's meet in the living room to discuss. Maggie's voice had lost any doubt. The family took a seat on the sofa in the living room. On the big TV screen, court procedures were now taking place in the pricey leather couch that had seen the miles of many family members. The instant her mother's hand took the passport away, conclusive security camera footage was captured. A deliberate, organic motion, Amy's smirk of complicity, years of envy, fathers in the open, deliberate lack of interest. Behind the newspaper was his dereliction of duty. Everything was captured on video. Here it is, the voice of her mother faltered. At her neck, her Hermes scarf trembled strangely. Officer Thompson played the phone in a low voice. The interaction at the airport was accurately recorded. The examination of the voice was finished. We'll just bring the actual family. The sound of her mother's voice reverberated in the dense atmosphere, as though she had now realized how terrible those words were. Amy started weeping all of a sudden. Tears stained her flawless makeup. Maggie, always, always. Maggie is flawless. I was always the second best. At instantly, years of jealousy exploded. Incredulously, her father sank into his leather recliner and gazed up at the ceiling. He was proud to be a teacher, dignity as the family's leader. Behind his reading glasses, everything fell apart. Wandering aimlessly were empty eyes. All I wanted was for you to think. The voice of her mother was thin. You always despise us. Always in operation. There was self-justification in her statements. In reality, who is demeaning whom? Maggie asked calmly, but no one replied. The instant years of power dynamics abruptly changed. Sarah clutched her mother nervously. Mom, what's the matter? Why are you sobbing, Grandma? The child's naive inquiries only served to highlight how serious the situation was. Amy was unable to even give her daughter a hug. She kept sobbing while hiding her face with her pricey manicured fingernails. I'll describe the court case. Officer Thompson produced papers. The documents, which announced the dissolution of the family, were carefully put within the black binder. Maggie stood looking out at the garden from the window. The desert plants glowed silver in the moonlight. The ground was covered with lengthy cactus shadows. This was the start of the end, and the start of a fresh life. Emily could hear nothing but the shuffle of legal papers in the dark quiet. The last moments of this family were still softly illuminated by the moonlight. It has been 3 months since then. The view mirrored in Maggie's eyes had altered entirely, yet the dusk over Phoenix was still lovely. In spite of the serious crime of passport theft, the legal settlement came to an unexpectedly speedy end. Maggie herself asked for leniency as settlement money, which was a major factor in the prosecution decision not to charge Susan. Maggie's account had been credited with $5 million by her mother. It was intended to end their relationship, but money couldn't cure a lot of problems. Her parents had to leave the affluent community of Paradise Valley. Their position in the Christian community was also gone, and rumors quickly propagated on social media. They made the decision to relocate to a tiny suburban community. All of her mother's valuable social networks were vanished. As a former educator, Father David's pride was also crushed. While names were being withheld, he resigned from all honorary posts on the local school board. The tragic event in a former teacher's household was extensively covered by newspapers. He became even more hopeless when his former classmates expressed their dismay. Amy's life also took a significant turn. She started going to counseling 3 times a week to deal with her long-standing jealousy of her sister. Her ostentatiously opulent lifestyle was no longer sustainable. She left the pricey yoga center. She abruptly stopped posting on social media. Greg, her husband, was thinking about getting a divorce after learning the truth about his wife. His income sharply declined along with his reputation in the real estate sector. They were nearing the conclusion of their theatrical and ostentatious life. The circumstances surrounding 8-year-old Sarah were the most tragic. Her paternal grandparents temporarily took her in because of the conflict between her parents and her mother's declining mental health. However, there was also no peace there. The little girl's heart is deeply shadowed by the adult disputes. Maggie had made a significant choice for herself. She restarted her career after leaving the Phoenix accounting business to accept a headhunting offer from a large Chicago firm. The new metropolis was a more pleasant place to live than anticipated. In contrast to Phoenix's desert, the view of Lake Michigan from her high-rise condo provided her a sense of freedom. She kept going to psychological treatment. All you wanted was love. Though not all of it was gloomy, the counselor's comments occasionally made her heart ache. She continued to video contact Sarah Auntie on a daily basis. When you visit Chicago, is it possible for us to meet again? Her naive grin was usually met with Maggie's own smile. Naturally. At any time, Auntie will come see you. Maggie's skills were fully appreciated at her new job. Promotion of the partnership was already evident. Being unrestricted by her family had allowed her to reach her full potential. She had made it a weekend ritual to stroll along the beach of Lake Michigan, while seeing how the lake's surface mirrored the sunset. Every now and again, Maggie remembered what had happened in Phoenix. One day, Sarah wrote a letter. There was so much love in the tiny penmanship. Auntie, please. I want to be as strong as you are, Auntie, even though Mommy is still not feeling well. So when I grow up, please wait for me. The letter was held against Maggie's breast. She shed a few tears, but they weren't ones of remorse. From the balcony of her high-rise, she gazed at the lights of the city below. The breeze from Chicago brushed her hair. Thus, this is the definition of true freedom. There was a trace of pride in her soliloquy. Tomorrow would start. Another day has begun, a life that was all her own, not bound by anybody. The surface of the lake mirrored the moonlight. As though praising the start of her new existence, it rippled softly. Everything had just started, and everything had finished. Maggie's eyes mirrored the future, was more brilliant than before.